Hello everyone, welcome back to Critical Hits Month of Horror. I'm David.
I'm Kyle.
And I'm Matthew.
And this week we're going to be looking at the Blair Witch Project, the story of three college filmmakers who get lost in backwoods Maryland searching for the Blair Witch. So, what did you guys think?
I can go first.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so this is my first time seeing this movie, and I gotta say, I love found footage. It is my favorite type of horror stories. When I think about horror movies, my favorite ones are horror stories. It's always gonna be found footage. Marble Hornets, Paranormal Activity. They just have a really good style, and just seeing a movie that had basically invented that was really cool to me. So I really enjoyed it. I think the acting was really really good. It felt very authentic and raw, like you need in this kind of storytelling. So overall, I'd say I really liked it.
I this was also my first time, and it was not at all what I was expecting. To be perfectly honest, I expected to see a little bit more. I expected for there to be a little bit more of the supernatural elements and less of people getting lost in the woods and showing us how very lost in the woods they are. And boy, do they ever get lost in those woods.
Did you get tired of an hour and 20 minutes of trees?
It did feel like it got a little old for me personally. Maybe that was because of the expectations, what I thought it would be a little bit. I expected more people, for it to be a little bit more of them getting bumped off one at a time, that sort of...
Like a big group of people getting...
Yeah, very very much the 80s, 90s horror kind of teen group, that sort of event. And, I'm not saying it's bad. It hit the beats it was supposed to hit. I think it did a very good job. It just didn't work for me, at least this time.
Well,
what did you think?
I think as for me, because this was not my first time watching it. I actually first remember watching it when it first came out, and I was probably around 10 or 11.
Yeah. And
I actually really loved it, and to the point that I actually got really big into the background mythology and stuff like that. And so even though I didn't care for it as much this time just because I'd seen it so many times. But I liked it a lot, and I think a big part of that was though because of the viral marketing that went on and the entire mythology that was built up behind the movie. I got so into that actually I think it made the movie itself a lot better for me.
Well, that was very novel at the time. This was 1999, and we were seeing people finally really learning how they could use the internet to kind of generate this audience.
Yeah,
and with this found footage style movie, they were able to make these interviews and extra documentary footage that they would put up on their website that would give it more of this sort of, is it real, is it not, kind of feeling that was a part of what made this movie so attractive.
Yeah. And
I remember, there were some cases of people... thinking, so was this an actual documentary in a very... it was like the Orson Welles and
War of the Worlds
kind of thing.
Yeah, I thought when I was 11, I actually thought a lot of it was real. I was 11.
You were 11.
They managed to outsmart 11-year-old me, so...
It's a success.
Curses.
But that's the strength of found footage storytelling, is trying to make the audience fully believe this happened.
Yeah.
They talk about something there for us all, and in that moment where he says, I see why you like having the camera, it's like another reality there. And so it allows that person inside of all that to distance themselves. Well, however, on the outside, that's what gets us closer. That little reality that's going in between them and the thing, we're tapping into that same reality. So where we might be more outside, at that point, we're that one step closer.
Well, it's interesting because for the horror genre by nature, it's very in order for a horror movie to be just really, really good, you really have to be able to put yourself in the shoes of the characters. Yeah. And I think the reason why the found footage format works so well with horror is because it's just another way of connecting you that much more to it. Because you're seeing so much, literally directly from their perspective.
You are.
It's super raw, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this movie also had tons of ad-libbing in it, too.
Oh yeah, well, pretty much the broad story, story elements were written, but in terms of, the dialogue and stuff, it was all just ad-libbed in character.
Yeah, you should explain some of that process, because it's really, really fascinating.
Yeah. Well, basically what happened is it was filmed over the course of 8 days. The actors, they actually stayed in character almost the entire time.
Oh my gosh.
In fact, in order to get out of character, they added a code word that they had to use. Okay. So they were that much into it. As you see in the film, they filmed most of it themselves. Yeah. The directors would just randomly mess with them. So there's a scene where they're all inside of a tent and the tent starts shaking and they run out and they're freaked out. That was genuine because the directors did not tell them that was going to happen. They just went up there one night and just started shaking the tent, and they and them running out, that was totally natural. and like what they do is the way that they'd feed the actors is they'd give them like food packages, but then as filming went on and they were supposed to be more desperate, they'd give them less food. Like
people want to go into acting.
Yeah, it was very much that that sort of let's traumatize the actors school of directing.
You're gonna be big, kid. You're gonna be big. You're gonna be a star. But first, you gotta do this.
It's just insane.
Well, it's that's wild.
Yeah, and so this, and I think that's one reason why I actually think the acting is extremely good. I mean, some people knock it. I mean, and some people say that like it was too over the top. Honestly, I think it's totally believable for the situation it's in, and I think the circumstances under which it was filmed kind of demonstrate that.
I think the rawness of the movie, even like at the beginning, they do these interviews, and the interviews are a really good way to introduce you to the lore of the Blair Witch. Mm-hmm. But all the people they meet just seem like small town folks. Like there's this awesome scene where there's these two guys in this river, just fishing, and you can tell they've probably done this for years, and they're just constantly contradicting one another, and it's so laid back, but also
the one
very
guy who
serious.
believes in the legends,
and
then the one guy who thinks, well, allegedly this happened.
Yeah, it's all. One guy thinks it's all hogwash, and the other guy's a devout believer that you don't go messing with that witch because she'll kill you.
Kids will never learn.
Yeah, and like it's just funny because like they're so casual talking about something that's so serious and heavy, that it seems really real.
And they're both fishing back to back there. Those were some really good shots.
Yeah, like there's some
kind of fun.
There's some great little scenes like that throughout the film.
Which having the film students kind of helps.
But in the movie has tons of lightheartedness like that at the beginning. Like the first half of the movie has a lot of humor in it actually. Mm-hmm. And you like kind of laugh when they record the actual documentary because the girl takes on this serious face and she talks about all the children that have died.
She's so over the top.
It's over the top and ridiculous. But then the movie like halfway through takes this drastic turn, and even though you suddenly go from like laughing and enjoying this company to being kind of stressed out with them, it doesn't feel like unnatural. Like even that turning point is very real because of the found footage format, I would say.
Yeah, it's very believable. Just sort of like the emotional peaks and valleys they have. I mean, it's the kind of thing where things just get worse and worse until they start just sort of laughing just at just how screwed up their situation.
It's not so much
your shoes are wet.
Like it's not so much a monster movie; it's watching people break down because they have no way of escaping the situation.
Yeah, exactly. It's almost like The Shining with less supernatural stuff.
Yeah.
So one thing I definitely want to talk about is in this movie, for those of you who haven't seen it, I'm sorry, but you never see the monster, right? You never see the killer.
Yes, you do not see...
like there might be, some people might argue that at the very end there's a slight image of the witch standing there, but really, you don't see anything. For me, I felt like that worked because like especially coming from the last movie, The Thing, where like in the first like 10 minutes you see this thing and all of its horror.
Yeah.
This movie, like the horror is not generated by what you see, but what isn't seen.
Well, now that's something special there because you bring up The Thing, which was a movie where you know that monster is there, but it's hidden from you until it strikes. So it could have been anyone, it could be anywhere. This takes that principle of that unknown and makes it even... it exaggerates it even more.
And a big part of that was just necessity. I mean, this was a super low-budget movie.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's why, hence the found footage element.
Well, this was a style that a lot of people kind of came across after, we had... some of that more gothic horror writing. People tried to experiment a little bit. You get guys like Hodgson who write these stories where you don't actually see the ghosts or you don't actually see the monsters, and that's followed later by writing like Lovecraft, where they immediately are telling you about all of these different shapes to the thing instead.
Yeah, well, and I think that this was probably at least partially a kind of a reaction to like sort of the 80s and the early 90s, which had a lot of the horror movies were just gore fest.
Oh yeah.
Well, they weren't
Predator,
just gore fest.
Alien, like you always see the thing in those movies.
Yeah.
It was the monster became a personality, and it became it was a draw to it.
Well, and it gets to the point where like with Freddy Krueger and Jason, they become the stars.
Voorhees. They are the stars.
But see, this is different. It's all about
the characters.
It's all about the characters and the humans.
Not the witch.
And so like it's not,
and they're not just
like,
the dumb kids who are going to get killed by the slasher, and that's the real reason you're watching it, is to see that guy in the hockey.
And so it's not just it's not about the fact that they find piles of stones like stacked around wherever they camp. Because I mean, in and of itself, that doesn't really mean anything. It's just how they react to it.
In this movie, everything is, I would say, presented but never explained. So like you see the stick figures in the forest.
Yeah, you don't know.
You see the handprints on the walls.
The fact that the rocks are stacked right around their tents.
In a triangle.
You can tell that they're is something doing this, but you don't know what.
It's just sort of this vague, witch-like stuff. But yeah, you never learn like the
which
like, the
allows
details of it.
And part of the fun is that allows the characters to kind of keep on believing in a very solid world.
Yeah.
Where this could have just been some guys in the backwoods messing with them.
And they bring that up several times. And they do, and I do think they do a good job of keeping that plausible for a surprisingly long period.
But at the same time, it's also it's also clear it's an established fiction to keep them sane. But it's an interesting situation where, as audience members, the characters aren't going to explain what's happening. The monster's never going to appear. You are only going to get clues, but you have to put it together yourself to be like, oh, this is what this is doing. Yeah. This is why this is happening.
And the thing is, it relies entirely on the viewer's imaginations, which is why I think this could have only worked in a found footage format.
Yes.
Really, because you need that level of connection in order to have that element work.
Found footage format is really, really cool.
And this movie,
it's my favorite. Wait until horror stories.
And this movie, it didn't quite kick it off. There were a few earlier movies, but
but
this was by far, it was the first one that was actually watchable. There are earlier ones, seriously, not even in a so bad it's good. Just don't watch them. They're useless.
But now we've got all sorts of different kinds of horror movies that happen here. Diary of the Dead was a good zombie one that happened.
Paranormal
Activity.
That's the found footage. It's actually coming to dominate the horror genre.
Yeah.
And it's even branching into others, like with Chronicle.
Chronicles. That's a superhero.
The superhero in those End of Watches was like a cop story. It was also found footage.
And those I didn't really like End of Watch, but other people did. And I loved Chronicle.
Cloverfield. Giant monster.
And so we're seeing how this one thing that started out in horror, it's able to sort of branch out and use those advantages in other genres.
Something that I find really fascinating is it doesn't have to be an entire movie shot in this way. Found footage can be used in any sort of movie as just a minor thing. Look at The Dark Knight and that scene where the footage that they found of the Joker with the guy in the meat locker there.
Yeah, on the TV.
And how we're seeing through Joker's video camera and Bruce's TV at that point, and it feels so much closer for that strange amount of distance. As he's talking to that guy and mocking him,
and even in that one scene, Heath Ledger just did that entire thing himself. That was another thing. Like with the found footage, relying entirely on the actor to be able to film.
That's the strength of the found footage, right? Is that it's the actor has to act with the camera to physically interact with the camera.
Well, that one scene, that famous scene, it's on almost every cover where you see Heather's face just in front of the camera, and she's just totally breaking down. That kind of thing could have only happened in a movie like this.
Yeah, with found footage.
No, it was very good.
I do think it's a type of storytelling that lends itself best to horror, though.
Oh yeah.
Because like you said, horror is all about making us experience the uncomfortableness or the evil or the wrong that is happening to this individual or these people. Mm-hmm. And in this case, having the found footage has that experience of also giving the characters a way of testimony. So a lot of characters Marble Hornets brings this up a lot, which I love. As found footage, that one's super good. But a lot of characters carry the camera not only as a way to distance themselves from their horrors, but also as a way to testify this happened to me.
Yeah.
And I need people to know that.
And so obviously you never see the monster. It ends on a really ambiguous note. What do you guys think about that?
I don't know. The part of the thing for me is. Again, I don't know what I was expecting. If I was expecting more supernatural, more slasher stuff, but it really did drag for me. And this was only how long? In 88?
Oh yeah, it's 80 minutes long, and
yeah.
Even at that, it actually, even for someone who likes it, it feels a little long.
It felt.
Yeah, I think
this was Walking in the Woods, the movie, and people talking about walking in the woods and how lost they are in them woods, and it just got a little bit old for me, and. Part of it, and this is the thing. There are pros and cons to showing your monster, and I think that one of the downsides to this movie, even though it's terrifying not being able to see where it's coming from on an intellectual level, on an imaginative level, there are points where you need to do something to keep the audience engaged. And while the story of these people getting stir crazy in the woods and turning on each other and trying to bond and move forward and then it not working, that's a fascinating story, but since it's been packaged so much as a horror and packaged so much to do, especially even in the movie itself, to do with this witch, I kind of wanted to see something, and every time I was told in those stories of when she was a child she saw this thing, I expected something like that to come up later in the movie. I expected to see some You know what I expected to see? I expected to see more people getting killed off or more things happening. Because the moments with the sticks and the trees, that was cool. The rocks, they were fine. But that moment where you see the tooth wrapped up in there.
Yeah,
And,
what
in
happens
the wicker.
is that one of the 3 kids just disappears one day, and then sometime later they find a bunch of sticks wrapped up in his pieces of his shirt. And Heather, she unties it and she finds like a bloody tooth.
And I think that's the thing. I think I wanted unique events that made this terrifying,
Yeah.
rather than just the prolonged experience of these people have gotten themselves lost in the woods.
I think it's interesting because I sometimes got that feeling that like I wanted something to show up at the end, something to get one of the kids in front of the camera.
Whenever I hear like criticisms of the movie, it's usually there was no, they didn't feel like there was any kind of money shot at the end.
But at the same time,
you got the where he's standing in the corner thing, which ties back to that.
Really
yeah, which actually worked fine for me, but that's partially probably because I knew the backstory of that.
Well, we were given that story of how they would
Yeah.
stand the kids in the corner, that murderer.
Yeah.
while they killed the other one.
While they killed the other one.
But,
And that
so-
actually, for me, that was actually a highlight because it then tied into that mythos that was already there.
Yeah.
I felt like we were given this really cool bunch of legends that didn't get played with as much as they could.
See, I really disagree with you because I think the story demonstrates the first half of the movie has all those interviews in it. It's so interesting because all the interviews go from one extreme to the other.
Yeah.
One extreme being supernatural, witchcraft, magic, and the other one being it didn't happen. And there's also actually a third point where
There's a
people
third
said
one where it's kind of
there's a third point where it's like actually no, it's actually really gritty. It's like no, kids were killed in that cabin. Kids went missing 5 years ago, and we don't know where they went.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there was also the people where it's just like, yeah, my grandma would tell us stories, kind of thing.
But you take all of those legends and you mix them up together, and that's what this movie's doing. Like, the movie has all of those elements in it if you look for them.
Well,
you could watch this movie and you could walk away and say, wow, they got bewitched and the witch killed them. Or you could say, some crazy person in the forest killed them. The movie balances legend telling very well. It balances both the extremes and the unextremes by showing us a story, a situation where anything could have happened, and so everything kind of did. Because the movie wasn't about the witch
it wasn't.
These kids. It was about these kids and this traumatic situation.
And that's why I think that I came in there expecting the Blair Witch, and I got the Blair Witch Project.
Yeah, that's fair.
And that is probably why I was disappointed. Or not so much disappointed as just, it just didn't excite me.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think this is one of those movies where either you're really you like it or you don't.
You like it or you don't. Because I get why it's a good movie. I get why it's good and why so many people like it. I think that it just and I can acknowledge that it's made of some very good choices in how it was done. It just didn't work for me personally. That's fair. That's pretty much just what I'm going to say.
Yeah, and it didn't work for a lot of people. Like out of all the movies we're doing, by far, this is the one that has sort of like the most negative buzz. Like it didn't really become like a. It's not really a cult classic.
Well, it had some Razzie nominations.
Oh yeah.
man.
In fact, it's actually one of the highest. Like if you look at Rotten Tomatoes scores, it's one of the highest movies on Rotten Tomatoes that has Razzie nominations.
That's just crazy.
Which is really interesting.
It definitely is the most questionable of the.
Because for those of you who don't know Razzies are like bad movie awards. We're talking Catwoman got these kinds of things.
Yeah.
And
I would say out of the 4 movies we're doing for this month, this is certainly the one that's most questionable. Should this be a horror classic? But I would think that looking at what they did with found footage and looking at how much that's impacted all of horror storytelling,
very influential.
This movie is incredibly credible and should be worth noting.
Sure. Yeah.
That's pretty much the end of it, really. Yeah. And I mean, there's a sequel.
Yes, there is, and it's a fascinating thing. Maybe next year.
Maybe next year.
Never.
Maybe there's some alcohol next year. What is next year? Bad horror movie month? Oh god.
We could do that. Yeah, there's. Yeah. I mean, the hardest part would be narrowing down 4 movies. Actually. But anyways, I think that's it for today.
Oh man.
Join us next week. We're gonna talk about the movie Scream.
Yes.
All right.
And all right, guys. Catch you later.
Take care.